Hi there, everybody, and thank you for joining us once again for another episode of the I'll Try That podcast. I hope our voices are familiar to you now. If not, go back, listen to some old episodes. It's me, it's Matt, here with Joe for this episode. Our pursuit of hoppiness today, we're focusing in, I suppose in a figurative sense, on the Small Beer Co. Really interesting idea with low percentage beers. Who these guys have obviously got a bit of an interest in slightly changing the shape of beer culture in the UK, but we'll get into that in a little bit more detail in due course. But first, I'm going to pass over to Joe for some news that I suppose everyone involved in, everyone who's got a bit of a passing interest in beer at the moment has probably heard. Yeah, Joe, what's been going on recently that a lot of people have been talking about?
Well, we're talking about the big blue. We're talking about big Bud Light, and the fact that their recent news is that they are no longer the second largest purchased beer in the US, which is huge news because they have held that space outside of their other Budweiser, beer. Now the Bud Light version has been number 2 for so long, and they have plummeted down the
22 years or something like that.
Yeah,
I think they were
crazy.
In that spot.
You think of the best selling beers in the US, and you always think to go to Bud Light, right? Don't you? You always think of Bud Light as synonymous with the US beer, and things. But the reasons of why they've plummeted, I think, is quite interesting. So it's to do with basically what it boils down to is some seriously bad marketing decisions. Let's put it that way. And I think there's been one that's very recent that's kind of been a catalyst. But, I was talking to you off air about it. I think that, I know Bud Light have been losing sales, year on year, for a long time. They've been on a bit of a downward trend. Mm-hmm. But the recent decisions that they've been making has really kind of exponentially made that free fall, basically.
Yeah. And particularly this latest bit of news, I suppose, is them sort of stepping into an arena that is, particularly in the US, pretty divisive. I think it's probably fair to say.
Well, that's it. And I guess before we kind of get into the meat of what they've actually done, I just kind of throw it out, Babs. What do you think of when you think of Bud Light? Who is a Bud Light drinker?
So I feel like I might be playing into your hands a little bit. This is the normal. I don't know. The word I want to use is Americana. A little bit of, someone who really identifies with, it's always struck me as a very American beer, the Patriot, it's I don't know, a lot of TV and film in the US. I would sort of imagine these very American characters drinking Bud Light. It's the American beer. I don't know. I think I'm going to get this wrong now, but actually I don't even think it was this beer, but I have an image of Stone Cold Steve Austin smashing 2 cans of beer over his head and in the ring and pouring them all down himself. But that kind of, shall we say, maybe politically a little bit right leaning. A little bit a sort of a proud flag wearing American, I suppose.
Yes,
is maybe what
I think you're right.
Would think of as a Bud Light drinker.
I've always thought of Bud Light as being so synonymous with sport, especially in the States. It just goes hand in hand. It's they've really targeted sports heavy, for the Bud Light.
I think
that's exactly it. And I think the whole point of the Bud Light is that it's kind of lower ABV than the normal Budweiser, lower calories. It was that you could drink them over a period of time. And, as we know, all American sports can't take long, doesn't take 30 minutes. It all takes 4 or 5 hours to get it done, Yeah.
So they should like cricket, shouldn't they? I suppose.
I think they have their version, which is baseball. But anyway, it's anyway. So I think with that in mind, you're who we think they are targeting for their beers. I think Bud Light had a different view recently. Basically, what they've done is that they've gone to go and work with an up and coming influencer who, let's face it, is kind of an influencer in a small segment of the populace of people who might even consume the Bud Light drink. But because they went and did a small, and it was in all intents and purposes, it was a small collaboration where they created bespoke cans just for this influencer, not to be sold to the public, but just for this influencer to have for I have no idea why they would even do that, what the kind of the optics of doing that is. But, basically the consumer base of Bud Light got hold of that, and has then decided to boycott Bud Light because they no longer feel like Bud Light is speaking to them and they are protesting basically against the company.
So to expose my not knowing the names of famous people on the internet, I was talking to a friend about this story. I believe it was Dylan Mulvaney, I think. And okay. I was talking to some friends who are not interested in beer in the slightest. And we were just talking about things that were in the news. And I said, I know you guys aren't as into beer as me, but have you heard this thing about Bud Light? It's kind of an interesting story. And they went, oh my God, what with Dylan Mulvaney?
Okay, so they knew
the name
him.
Of the person. So
they knew them. Yeah,
interesting take on it. But they've. I wondered if it was that they were kind of going after a new, a sort of a new target audience, I suppose. But I think the traditional Bud Light drinkers felt like it was a step away from the identity they associate with the beer, right? So it didn't go down very well with Kid Rock, I think it was.
Yeah, he was one of the first right leaning influences of those generation, I suppose, that was kind of jumped on board with it. Did this video of him shooting Bud Light cans. Yeah, I think because it's America, they have guns apparently all over.
That's one that you wouldn't think would get that much traction on this side of the Atlantic, but over there, that's like a powerful statement, isn't it? I think
that's it.
The Brits would be like, "What? What are you doing? Where did you get a gun?"
Yeah, that'll be more the question. Yeah. Exactly. I think, if I'm honest, I think it's them, trying to appeal to everyone to show that they're progressive, they're tapping into the zeitgeist, which is what's the common trends right now. But I think, if I'm honest, they've just completely overshot their, hand of who their actual base is and who are their majority of their sales. Because let's face it, with this protest and the fact that they've gone from being the number 2 sold beer in America after 22 years to then suddenly dropping massively out of those numbers, you kind of know who your consumer base is. So,
Yeah, and it was taken because, I think it was I think you were sort of alluding to this before, but then also kind of one may think you'd make a bad situation worse, that they had this interaction with Dylan Mulvaney, and then they kind of backtracked on it.
Yeah.
I understand, big fans of Dylan Mulvaney and then the LGBT groups in the US. Also, or I think bars as well actually were not just not buying Bud Light, but actually some places were boycotting AB and Bev products altogether. I think, weren't they? So AB and Bev they're probably protected by that. Almost the distance from, they've got the Bud Light label, but obviously they've got all the others as well. But would you know what kind of surprised me? Weird segue. Are you, if Drabbers was, you'll know. That sounds like I'm being unfair to Drabbers. He wouldn't know. But I was surprised. You'll know who overtook Bud Light, I imagine.
Do tell me. I was half thinking it might be Yuengling, which is a very American beer.
So I don't know who I thought it would be.
Okay.
But when I found out who it was, I was like, oh, that's interesting. It's not Yuengling, it's Modelo.
Ah, okay.
So great. So they've always been, pretty high up in their in consumption in the US. But they're now number one. And in some ways, change is always a good thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I think, it's good. Modelo needs its time in the sun. It's such a great beer. It's fabulous. But I was going back to, because this was obviously this is a very recent, this just happened and this, created this huge hubbub about it and stuff. But this is not I wanted to find out what other people have been doing with the brand. Because from my opinion, the brand of Bud Light has been in decline as well as sales for a long time. Yeah. But I feel like the reputation of it and what people think the value of Bud Light and why you would drink a Bud Light has always been a bit in the gutter. Anyway, so I was reading a really interesting article by Robert Lackey, who is the marketing genius behind, the Waza, promos of the 1990s. He did the Talking Frogs, commercials that you remember that debuted at the Super Bowl. That's it. So, all the kind of the real famous Budweiser ads that you can think of. And this is not just Bud Light, this is Budweiser adverts. This is Robert Lackey, basically, who's created this. And he weighed in on this whole topic and he basically just to summarize his very interesting points that he made, I would definitely look up Robert Lackey's take on this. But basically, he just says the brand is, as a brand, they've been devaluing and undermining everything that they did through the late 90s, through the 2000s to build the brand equity, to create this superpower of Budweiser. The marketing teams, for 2 decades now have been undermining that and have been really ruining the brand, in his opinion. So, this is again, like, an example of the latest thing that they've done. Again, to show that AB and Bev are taking it seriously, a lot of marketing executives on the Budweiser side have been fired, since this whole stuff has happened.
I shouldn't laugh, but it was funny though, because I think I also dropped you that message offline with the bit that really made me laugh. I read a couple of different outlets article on this, and there was a line in the Independent, I can't remember the journalist's name, just that all their source had said, the case of AB and Bev in this instance is a textbook case of what not to do. Yeah, there's no sort of two ways about it, kind of thing.
I think you're right. If you're going to be studying marketing or beer marketing, or even not just marketing in general in the future, this is probably going to be written down in a textbook as a case study of like, this is what, a poor example. We've thumbed through many a marketing and business textbook, haven't we, Matt, and read through these case examples, but it's amazing to actually live one. You're seeing one in real, unfolded before your eyes, basically. Yeah.
In fairness, when we were flicking through those, we always had them like inside the cover of a porn magazine, so it looked like we were reading something normal, just to hide the shame of what we were reading.
Something less embarrassing than reading the actual textbooks.
Good housekeeping was sometimes a cover that we read. Good. Well, I think we've covered that. Obviously, a lot of people who listen will be aware of this story. Yeah, big news anyway. So I sort of felt we had to have a bit of a coverage of that, but we've done that now. So we will move on from our hop topic to our pursuit of hoppiness. As I mentioned earlier, so we're traveling down to, this is a London-based brewery. I think London's first B Corp brewery.
Yes, I love that fact of theirs. Yeah, love that.
And this is the Small Beer Co. Yeah, small beer.
The original Small Beer.
And Small Beer, so they have adopted it as their name, but it was just a type of beer before, right? This is something that was under 2.8%, and the idea was, it's kind of like what I wanted to describe when I was sort of first looking at this was kind of an uber sessionable beer. But Joe, you because you spent a bit more time, particularly of late in London than I have, but they're sort of making waves in London a bit already, aren't they? And now I think we've been able to source them from supermarket.
Yeah, absolutely. This is, a small beer, any kind of, most people might have come up against this, or understand kind of the phrasing about that it might mean an under 2.8%. And for generations, a small beer, especially in the UK, has been like a staple for, pubs and, communities almost. It's like, you sit around, you drink your small beer, and then and so basically what these guys are doing is that they, and James Grundy is one of these guys, is one of the co-founders of the Small Beer Brew Co. He's basically saying that they're taking this concept of under 2.8%, it follows on this low ABV trend that we've been seeing over the last 10 years come back into fashion, in beers, but they're basically taking this old established well-known concept but putting it into a modern phrasing. So what they were basically saying is that they were finishing work, might have been like a Monday, but felt like they needed to go to the pub to deserve, you've earned a beer after hard day work, but they didn't want to, kind of go and consume, 3 or 2, even, 2 pints of a, 6.8, 8%, whatever, and actually they were finding that all the lower alcohol options weren't of such a good quality that they wanted it. So they saw a gap in the market. It then linked back to an age old tradition, of this small beer. And so, hey presto, here is the Small Beer Company. But I was thinking about, I was actually reading more into these guys, and I was really enjoying how they've done their own like kind of modern twists on things. And you mentioned about the B Corp, and wondered if you had a bit more detail about why they were kind of like the B Corp.
Yeah, so I just knew that they were brewing with real sustainability in mind. And actually, I think not necessarily because of that, but for other reasons, people have said, well, actually, they viewing that it's a lower alcohol beer. a lot of people go and expect that as a result that they kind of compromise on the the quality and I suppose the quantity of the ingredients that they put in, but not a bit of it. So through sort of bespoke and more effective brewing techniques, they've saved something like 6.5 million liters of water that would normally be wasted through their sort of brewing methods. So sounds obvious, that's quite a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they are very sustainably minded brewers as well.
Well, I was loving this statement. They said that the industry standard for brewing a pint of beer is to use 8 to 10 pints of water to make 1 pint of beer, and that was what I saw. And they use 1.5 pints for theirs. So they use an 80% reduction in water on every single pint of beer that they produce, which I think is astronomical. I mean, they're obviously one company doing their bit to kind of help preserve water, but again, they're doing amazing things to kind of even just be in that area.
Yeah, and award winning as well. So I think they got the Water Management Award for beer from the Drink Business Green Awards 2019. They've had another award in the last 12 months, the Sustainable Use of Water Award at the Footprint Drink Sustainability Awards. So getting recognition for it as well. There is also, if you're going to have a look on their website, there's a really really useful graphic on what that pints of water that goes into an actual bottle is, because I'm a visual learner. When you look at how much of a contrast that is, it's quite stark. So Joe, have you got? I'm only drinking the lager at the moment, but I did pick up one of their IPAs.
Oh, good!
And it's a real nice. And I said to you also before, I'm really taken with the bottles here because I've got the glass bottle rather than the can.
Yeah.
And it's like a stubby, but it's a little bit bigger than a stubby. It's that kind of cute, almost medicine bottle shape.
Well, that's it. And it's so medicine bottle vibes because it's brown. It's a brown bottle as well. It's not that, kind of green bottle. It's really fascinating.
Yeah. But 350 ml. So it's, it's like, that's more than half a pint, isn't it? But, scarcely bigger than a can of Coke. Sounds a weird thing to pick up on, but just sits nicely in your hand. It is, at time of recording, we are kind of, summer has sprung. That's not the phrase here, but it's pretty warm where I am. This was a real treat to get out of the fridge this evening. I've got all the fan turned on behind me. It's really chilled. It's just not too, and I've said this about a couple of beers we've had recently, that they're really so hoppy that they kind of knock you off your chair. I mean, I've got the lager, of course, rather than an IPA or something sort of more full on. And this is sort of comfortably under 2.8% because this is 2.1, and it's just that quite easygoing. Have a sip and feels like you're having a beer without, going sort of full tilt at it, basically.
Well, talking of the lager, some little stats here. So it's only 0.7% of your units per can, 73 calories per can of it. And again, the can's a bit smaller. It's 330 mils, so they're 350, so you increase a little bit. But yeah, I was looking at these. So small bit, I have the session pale. So they've got the lager, they've got the session pale, they've got an IPA, a steam, which I don't know what that is, so I want to find out what a steam beer is, and they've also got a dark lager as well. All of these are under 2.8% to all call themselves small beers. But this session pales is very tasty. I mean, Liz, my wife, also tasted this earlier on, and to just I wanted to get her review on this. And she was definitely like, oh yeah, I can definitely get the flavor there. And this is my Liz impression. Definitely getting some flavor there, but it's like she's here in this room right now. Definitely getting the flavor, but she was feeling like there was something a little bit missing from it. And I think that was what you were talking about before, about it wasn't like the double dry hopped, like big full flavor. Like this is a tasty beer. I'm enjoying this session pale. This has gone down very quickly, and I don't feel guilty by that because it's only 2.5%. So it's not feel like, if I have another couple, I'll be feeling off or falling off my chair. But I do feel like this is,
Yeah. And also not to sound like too, it sounds half conceited, half arrogant, but it's almost like we're kind of used to tasting like stuff that's maybe a little bit out of the ordinary. Also, we've tried some really full on beers just kind of as a matter of course, and we were fairly interested in them. But also, we don't do them every week, but we get used to trying the imperial stouts as well. I don't think this would be too much of a departure for a regular lager drinker who's like not trying lots of really bold and out there beers as well. So it certainly has its place, I'd say.
I think you're right, and I think I was reading a bit more about them. They actually say they use twice the typical amount of ingredients per percentage point they brew. So
that was it. Yeah.
That was kind of counter to the point of actually they're not like taking things out, they're actually putting more in, but they're just brewing it in a way that's lower ABV. So I think this is just like atypical for a small beer, that it has this slightly different taste to it. But what they're doing is so great because it's still like great quality product. And they're putting a load of effort into it, but it's delivering the best ever small beer you possibly can get. And I think that's my takeaway from these guys.
Yeah. I'm finding it also more and more when I talk to friends and stuff about no-low beers as well, and every now and then you go and have some drinks with someone, and someone's like, "Oh well, I'm driving, so I'm having the no alcohol or the low alcohol one." And I've been saying to people, talk to friends about doing the podcast, and they go, "Oh, so I can talk to you about beer and stuff." I go, "No, I can't possibly." But we say this thing about I keep having this point to them. They're like, "Do you know any good no and low alcohol beers?" And I've been sort of personal preference. I've been finding that the no and low alcohol versions of beers that well haven't stood up.
No,
however,
I agree.
The breweries who are there saying this is what we're going to do produce some really, really lovely stuff. And I've been saying to people, they go, "You were absolutely right." I mean, I'm just sharing experience. And I go, "I do a podcast, so I've got to be right." But a lot of people saying, actually, Big Drop.
Always swings to mind.
Lucky Saint. And all of these sorts of beers. I go, actually, I went and got a drink that is a planned and thought about no and low alcohol alternative, and it's been great. And these guys are probably following suit with that, aren't they?
Well, I think so, and I think I will always, if I want a no non-alcoholic beer, you've named the two that I would always go to. I go to Lucky Saint, I go to a Big Drop. There are a few breweries like Adnams who make their Ghost Ship, like standard beer in non-alc version, is very good for that product. Actually, I'm quite partial to the Heineken Zero. I think that's quite. Oh, and also actually the Corona Zero. If Travers was listening, that is very good. That's a very good.
He does
beer.
like that, doesn't he? Yeah, I haven't. I got to say, I haven't tried it yet.
But that being said, I haven't met too many like specific. These are the first guys I actually have to admit are the only they only do small beers, and I think that's really fascinating in this low ABV category. And I get what they're talking about. The fact that they're trying to brew this, this lower beer for modern lifestyles, i.e., you've got children, you've had a hard day at work, but you've got to work the next day. What do you want to, you want to take off the edge, or you're going to be sessioning for the whole day, well, then grab something that's you can do that with and not feel absolutely horrendous / make a tit of yourself, basically, so. I'm totally for it. I think this is really to use Travis's phrase. I'm totally for it.
I'm here for it.
I'm here for it. That's it. He loves saying that. I think it's great. I think they've really tapped into something here. And as I said before, these aren't, I haven't really looked at them too before, but I have definitely had their beers before, and each one has been tasty. So I think, the original small beer brew co is fascinating. They've tapped into something here. I was going to ask you though, do you think, in those examples that they were saying, in the particular one, okay, you and a colleagues, right? You've had a really tough Monday, and you feel like you're going to go to the, you've just completed on a deal or something, in your world.
It's just like the Wolf of Wall Street.
It's just the Wolf of Wall Street on yours. And you're going to go to the pub, which is not unheard of on a weekday. And you feel like, would you be reaching for one of these, or, if it was on tap?
I think I would. And that is probably still like a fairly new thing for me. I don't think I would have done it in the past. It might be being post the 3-0. It'd be really annoying and say, actually, technically on a Monday I played football. So actually, there was when I was maybe early mid-20s, there were occasions where I finished work on a Monday night and I did go to the pub and have a couple of beers and then play football. I massively regretted it. So I could maybe have one of these before I went. But actually, in case anyone is really interested in my like weekly routine now, Monday night is football, Tuesday's yoga, right? And so because I actually need a bit of a stretch out afterwards. And I come get back from yoga, I go and start cooking dinner. And I do sometimes. So also from previous recordings, I had a little big drop left over, and I was like, you know, I've been good for the last 2 nights. I would just like a little treat, but I don't want to be bad and have a beer. So I had big drop. And this could fit that gap really nicely if I just have like a little, just a little, you know, it's not a thing. And this could do that really nicely.
And don't feel too naughty as well, because it's got low carbs as well. So exactly. It's really hitting that health.
Did you say 84 calories or something like that?
73 for that one.
Well, I might as well have 2 then.
So we kind of covered their core beers of the lagers, the we talked about Session Pale, the Dark Lager and things. They also have other beers as well. They've got a wheat beer. You know, we know how we like a bit of a wheat beer.
I did see
wheat beer.
I think you can only buy that one. Is it in bigger bulk or something like that? Because I saw the prices was like.
It looks like 55 quid, so it's got to be. You've got to be. You're getting a 24 pack for 55 quid, which is pretty steep. I must say it's pretty steep for a 24 pack. But they've got an organic IPA. Yeah. Well, you could have a 24 pack, but it would have to last you a year, and then actually most of those would go out of date, and it wouldn't be fresh anymore. They've got an organic IPA, and they've got a hazy IPA that I can see as well. And they do kegs, so if you want your little mini kegs, which people do love, I'm going to dive in. You tell me a little bit on what you're seeing on your end. I'm going to dive in about what this steam beer is, because I need to find out more about steam beer.
Oh, I beg your pardon. I was just a little bit captivated by the hazy IPA, because that's the one where I was thinking like, you know, these are missing a little bit. I don't want to say edge, but that's the word that's in my heart right now. So a little bit of edge. And I was thinking the hazy IPA might be the, the one to go for. But this steam beer had completely eluded me until now. So I'm keen to know as well. Well, did you say it's the Session Pale you've got?
I've got the Session Pale, the blue one.
Because it's down in the fridge, but I think it's the organic IPA I've got.
You have to tell us that as well.
Actually, have some of it.
Why don't you go grab it, and I'll tell the listeners all about steam beers.
Yeah, 1 sec.
So steam beers, it's been around. It's been around since like the mid 19th century to mid 20th century. From California and in the east, the James River Steam Brewery in Richmond, Virginia, created this popular beer and has popularized it over there. So basically, they are highly effervescent beer made by fermenting lager yeast at warmer ale yeast fermentation temperatures. So it has 2 distinct but related meanings. So I think it's quite interesting. Again, it goes back to, it's like a California common beer, a competition category name for the beer family, which includes steam beers such as Anchor Steam Beer. So again, it's just they're taking an older concept, or a concept of beer that's had has got a history, and they're putting it into a modern twist. So this 5 litre keg that you can buy, and you can buy them in bottles as well. It does look like a very amber hue to its beer. So apparently, it kind of how they describe it. This is the original Spore Beer Co. They're saying that it beautifully bridges the gap between an ale and a lager. So I think that's quite fascinating. They're really trying to say that if you like your ales, you like your lagers, this might be something to try.
I do beg your pardon. It is indeed the Session Pale, so the same as you've got, but for purpose of consistency and thorough product testing, we better just find out.
Well, why don't you crack yours open, try it, and I'll do the numbers for where they're at. So, Instagram, they have 13.7k followers, and again, they're in the very sought after group of 1% for the planet. Again, following on for that, B Corp kind of credentials as well. So really looking after the planet there. And on Twitter, they have 1,658 followers. So definitely, focused more around Instagram, which makes a lot of sense.
It's an interesting juxtaposition. I mean, I was going to refer to the time of recording and when we put this episode out, but it's quite interesting because we're about to move from the new school to the old school, aren't we? So this is going to be an interesting little comparison we've got coming up, because we'll be talking about Vi and Stefana in a forthcoming episode, ladies and gentlemen. So stay tuned. Stay
Watch
tuned
this space.
Yeah, pretty.
What
cool.
do you think of the session?
Pretty cool. Oh, yeah, real tasty. And it's only just a little bit of edge off from a session that I would expect to be 4%. And so it serves its purpose really, really nicely. I think I do prefer it to the lager, actually. I think it's the that's just as simple as that. Basically, I like it more.
Which is interesting because usually we're finding the lower ABV to no ABV beers are better in lager form than they are in ales. But the fact this is a session pale that's very sessionable and it has a lot of taste to it, I think that's really good. So this was definitely bucking the trend of what we're seeing in the market at the moment. And I honestly think these guys have really tapped into something here. They've been around since 2017 and they're going strong. And I think they're just getting more and more popular. So look out for the Small Beer Co. So I think they're doing some great stuff. And that's all we have time for this week's episode of the I'll Try That podcast. And so from me, Joe, Rich,
Barber,
and Simo,
goodbye. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram,
Twitter,
I'll try that podcast.com,
and watch us on YouTube.
Goodbye now.